September. You've all had these pre-circulated before the meeting. Can I ask that the minutes are agreed and are an accurate reflection of the previous meeting? Thank you, they're agreed. Decision and action sheet. To consider the decisions and actions from the previous meeting of the 15th of September 2025.
Thanks, Chair. The last action from that was the training from the Centre for Governance, which we've had today.
Thank you. So moving on to item 5, declaration of interests. All members are reminded that they must disclose any interest they know they have in terms of business on the meeting's agenda, and that they must do so at this point on the agenda or as soon as they become aware of the interest. If the interest is disclosable pecuniary interest, they are also obliged to notify the monitoring officer within 28 days of the meeting. Has anyone any interest to declare? None are noted. Number 6, public questions. There are no public questions and we have no members of the public present to ask any. 7, decision on call-ins. There are no call-ins. So I'll move to item 8. And this is the Cabinet Portfolio Update from the Deputy Leader and Cabinet Member for Fairer Chelmsford, Councillor Foster. Thank you, Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Chair. The focus, and good evening everyone, the focus of Fairer Chelmsford over the past year has been housing and the scale of homelessness, which is driving the amount of temporary accommodation being utilised by the council. If we can move to, oh, have I got a clicker? Aha, I can click myself. Oh, okay. Sorry. So, can everybody see that? Am I in the way? Can you see it? Yeah. The group, this actually shows a rather depressing state of affairs. As you can see, starting from 2019 to 20, the rise in those in temporary accommodation, which is accompanied by a decline in the number of all lets from the housing register, including new build. That's the orange line, and the green line is new build affordable homes with nomination rights. You can see that if no one else presented as homeless, it would take at this rate over 2 years to negate the need for temporary accommodation, you know, with 500 in temporary accommodation. And actually this year we have the number of lets is below 100 by September, so 250 lets this year is highly unlikely. The reducing number of new build affordable homes is a significant factor in reducing the supply of lets. I have to point out this is not a local issue, not only a local issue, but a national one, with London especially being acutely hit, which increases demand for temporary accommodation locally, as London boroughs, we know, are forced to locate their homeless families in Essex, and we know that they have been doing that, and therefore we have to look further out for our temporary accommodation. This is the number of households on the housing register in each band, in each priority band. You can see the bands from 1 to 4. And you can see that from March 23, the total was just over 1,100. By March 25, it was 1,855, and it is now just over 2,000 households. And these are not people who just want to sign on to the register. We no longer allow people just to do that. These are people who are either homeless or they have a proven need for accommodation because they're overcrowded or they have a medical need. Before I rush on to the next slide, are there any questions about these particular figures?
So can I confirm? So this isn't the total housing register. This is just the fact it's like bands 1 to 4.
No, yeah, this is the total housing register.
So it's everybody who's on the housing register.
Yes, yeah. And that includes homeless households who will generally be in band 2. Band 1, they will be homeless and with multiple needs.
So at band 4, they could be
Oh, band 4, you've got very little chance of being housed if you're in band 4. Yeah, you've got very little chance if you're in band 3, actually, because if you look, we're the people in band 1 and 2. They're, you know, if we've got less than 250 lets a year, we don't even touch those. It is not a cheery picture, I'm afraid. However, the whole organisation is addressing this all the time, and these are some of the measures that are being taken. So we're pursuing 35% affordable housing on all schemes over a certain number, obviously. And I know that the planning department is really, you know, stressing that. We've had 23 family-sized homes funded by the Local Authority Housing Fund for use as temporary accommodation, and we're very hopeful. That's LAF. I'm always talking about LAF 2 and 3. That's LAF 2 and 3, and we hope very much that we will be in line to get funding in LAF 4. 24 units at Turning Point, that's where we have contributed funding for the chess scheme, and they're out towards stock. We're progressing 22 2 and 3 bed modular housing units at Meteor Way, and construction will start on 15 affordable homes at George Street once they've moved the Roman bones. Actually, I think they already have moved the Roman. They've moved them already, haven't they? Have they? Yeah. Sorry? Some of them, yes, yeah. We're ploughing on. And following Essex County Council removal of supported housing funding, the City Council has stepped in to fund existing and increase supporting housing provision. Currently 100 units with 33 expected in 25-26, resulting in an annual saving of 1.7 million. It's particularly important, I think, that we support supported housing, because we only accept single people, we only accept them onto the housing list if they're vulnerable, and just dropping people into accommodation doesn't necessarily assist them to keep that accommodation. We want people to retain accommodation. So that support, not only are we saving money, but we're also providing support, and hopefully won't find that we remove people from the revolving door. Sorry. Did anybody want to ask a question while we're on that one? No?
Councillor Foss, can I just ask one? The 15 affordable housing in George Street, what capacity are they? Are they family homes, or are they just going to be single occupancy?
No, they are family homes. I can't think of the exact configuration. 2-bed, 3-bed, 2-bed?
Sorry. Yeah, so there are some 1-beds, but there are also some 2-beds. So there's 6 1, 3 2s, and I think 6 3-beds in there. That was my last configuration of it.
Thank you. Councillor Steele, can you use your mic?
Yeah. Okay, so, I mean, if you add all that up, it's about 105 or 6 new accommodation, plus your affordable housing, plus the ECC removal. So, are you going to present a forecast of the impact of this on the register? So, can we see the impact of this on the register?
Not in this particular presentation,
no. Okay.
but we certainly. It wouldn't only be this. So, for instance, we've got Pims Road coming up. Pims Road is a CHP development where we have 12 homes that will be handed over quite soon. And what we want to do is to have a local lettings plan with CHP, which we would hope would result in more than just 12 families being taken off the out of temporary accommodation, and would result in more than 12 people coming off the register.
Okay, I suppose what I'm getting at is it's hard to make a judgment as to whether this is enough.
Oh, it's not.
Unless, right, okay,
Yeah.
well, you make a judgment, it's
Yeah.
not. It's not. Because also the need will grow as well, because it's been growing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In the forecast, in the next report, there are projections as to things that are coming, homes that will come online in the next couple of years.
Including the new build affordable homes.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, specifically of new build affordable homes at the end of that report. Oh. Just to emphasise that it's not that we're not doing anything. The officers in housing and in planning in the organisation are very, very good. If there's a sniff of funding available, they'll go for it. And we've successfully obtained over 6 million in the LAF funding, 3.5 for the single homeless accommodation programme, 2.2 affordable housing grant, and 250,000 brownfield land release funding, which I'm fairly sure is for Meteor Way, isn't it? Yeah, to enable us to sort of do the groundworks, etc., to help pay the groundworks at Meteor Way. And it's not that people are, that despite the difficulties caused by the housing market and rising demand for temporary accommodation, we're making a difference by slowing the demand. The bottom line of this graph is the actual increase. The November 23 forecast is the blue line, and September 23 forecast is the orange line, and that's when remember the Housing Action Group started working in September 23. We managed to reduce the forecast in November 23, but the actuals are the grey line. So there has been an impact of all the work that's been put in. The situation is still, we are dealing with a real issue, but at least what we're doing is somewhat effective. And that's it. That's as far. Have people got questions?
Are there any further questions? I have just got one, Councillor Foster. You said that London is taking places that obviously we'd like to use. How are they managing to slip in and get those underneath our noses?
Sometimes what they will do is, for instance, use accommodation which we would not. So, for instance, Threadneedle House, Hackney have got some flats in Threadneedle House that are one bedroom and bedsits, which we would generally not use. Now, it might mean in the future we have to, but certainly we didn't, and then Hackney snapped them up for families. They're not putting single people in there, they're putting families. Whereas when we looked at it and said, well, hang on, you'd have 60 single people. If we were using it, you might put 60 single people in there, and that would be basically unmanageable. And also, it does increase sort of strain on any of the temporary accommodation that we would rent. I don't know whether Mr Brooks has got concrete examples.
Yeah, so as Councillor Foster has said, the standard we would have for family accommodation, which is in accordance with the legislation and guidance, means we wouldn't use some of these properties that London authorities do. But the reason they're forced to do that is because of the numbers they've got that are homeless. So Newham, for example, is 9,000 homeless families that they've got to house. Some in London boroughs are 12,000. So they're just forced to use accommodation, which in an ideal world they wouldn't be seeking to house families in. And we're managing to house the homeless families we've got in accommodation that's in accordance with the space standards that government set and that we're comfortable with.
Thank you. Councillor Steele.
Yeah, so well done on the graph coming down, obviously, that's good news. So that lower curve, that's the actual homeless, i.e. the actual people in temporary accommodation. That's what you count as homeless, isn't it? They're not homeless, they're actually in temporary accommodation.
Yeah, well, they are homeless.
They're homeless.
We've accepted them as homeless, and we therefore have a duty.
So as that rises, what's the plans then for more temporary accommodation? We just keep buying more hotel places and more. What do we do?
Well, we do all the things that we try and we try and get 35% on all. We've got quite a lot of development ongoing. So, as I say, in the next report, you can see there are. So we pursue new, 35% affordable as much as we can, and as many family-sized, accommodation as we can. We provide support. We do things like there's a. I'm trying to think what it's called. Your Home's Your Choice. So we are supporting those in the refuge to say, okay, you could present to us as homeless if you're in the refuge, if you've come to Chelmsford because of domestic violence, but you can choose to go. You can present as homeless anywhere in the country if you have closer links with somewhere that you want to go. So we're facilitating that. That doesn't mean to say that we are rejecting anybody, but what it does mean to say is that we are ensuring that everybody knows the choices that they can make. Okay. So it's a whole raft of things that we do, because you can't just do one thing. You've got to do lots of things. Yeah, because so there's a kind of view that maybe we're just accommodating a ever-growing rise. So we just the only way to address it is to just keep building more houses, as opposed to trying to go to root cause as to why more and more people are presenting. But you're suggesting that there is some of that going on, and I know in the past you've talked about if someone's living in a 4-bedroom house because they've lived there all their life, we've got to encourage them to move on. Have we still got many in that position that where we've got under-accommodated houses? Well, CHP recently, I say recently, it's not that recent, is it? It's probably a year ago, did an audit, and we know that they had over 400 people who are living in accommodation which is perhaps bigger, larger than their needs. Which is why I'm always banging on about trying to get people to move, but all of those people, and there are probably many others in registered, in affordable and social housing, they have a tenancy. They don't have to move. Nobody can force them to move. What we can do is encourage them to move. So what we need to do is to provide accommodation which is acceptable to them, and also work with our registered providers to try and encourage them to move and provide support and catch them at the right age. An 80-year-old isn't going to, it's too late. You've got to catch people in their late 60s and their 70s to persuade them to move.
Okay.
So
Thank
it's
you. And that's only CHP 400. There are other housing.
yeah, there are others as well.
Yeah, similar. Okay, thank you.
Right, I'm going to finish that one there because I think item 9 will elaborate, I think, in some detail on some of the issues you're touching on in your presentation. So we'll move to item 9, please.
So I am again. Well, I'm introducing. I'm introducing, but I'm not going to go through this in detail.
That's fine, Councillor Foster. You go ahead and
Yes,
introduce.
I'll just introduce.
Sorry, I was expecting it to be...
It's okay, and then I'm going to,
Fine, thank you.
For people to. So this report sets out for the committee's information housing delivery monitoring statistics for 24-25 and provides members with an update on existing, new and proposed national and local initiatives that impact on the delivery of new housing. The recommendation is that the committee notes the contents of the report, but I sort of don't really propose to go through this in detail because it is a huge report. But just to say that in paragraph 3.9, estimated home completions trends, it does say that the figuring that there are 11,571 new homes included within major planning applications, yet to be determined by the City Council. So that's planning applications that have been made, not yet to be determined, but this includes 762 dwellings that form part of the meadows, which is expected to be withdrawn. And I think that has been withdrawn. Well, it has been withdrawn now, hasn't it? So, that has been withdrawn. And there was one other thing. If you look at table 2.7, which is the bedroom size of the 127 affordable housing dwellings completed in 24-25, compared to the identified need for the Strategic Housing Market Assessment, the SHMA, you will see that the larger homes were just, we need more larger homes. And over the last few years, we have concentrated on, when we've been asking our registered providers, when we're planning for the homes, new homes that are going to be built on our land, we've tried to increase the number of 3-bedroom homes. So, for instance, George Street we were talking about, there are 3-bedroom homes included in George Street, which is quite a small plot, but we managed to get some in there. And we can see that overall housing delivery has decreased, but that is in line with the national picture. Certainly there was something in the Sunday Times recently where they said that housing starts are the lowest they've been since 2008. So this is a picture which isn't unique to Chelmsford. It's actually national, and is of course why the government is particularly keen to get their housing programme started. So that was all I was going to say in this, but if people want to ask questions, I'm sure our colleagues will be happy to help, or indeed to add anything if they wanted to.
Thank you, Councillor. I've just got one question, because the observation that it's decreasing everywhere I think is absolutely true. But in the context paragraph, it says it's decreased by 19% here, compared with 5% elsewhere. So I'm just wondering why there is such a significant difference in the lack of build in Chelmsford, if I'm reading that right. It's decreased by 19% here, and then it says, albeit a lower margin, 5% completions were nationally. Is that how it should read? And why is that? Because that's a huge difference, isn't it?
Yeah, I think some of that is to do with the dropping off of the pre-application inquiries that we've also had in Chelmsford. And I think probably it's also a reflection that we still have a similar volume within the major planning applications in Chelmsford that we had last year. So we still got a lot sat in that kind of middle channel, if you like, with not a lot coming out at the end and a drop-off of what's coming through at the middle. So what our focus as officers obviously is, and I assume as members, is to deal with that, the large numbers that are currently planning applications within the council that have either got a resolution from planning committee to grant planning permission. So that's us securing that section 106 agreement on a few of those that are referenced in the appendix. But it's also those that we are trying to bring to planning committee, i.e. zones 1 and 3 at Bewley, which has a huge number of them tied in, or Chelmsford Garden Community, and some other major applications from planning applications that are within the adopted plan at the moment. So we're not talking about any of the Regulation 19 ones, but things like the West Chelmsford allocation and 7A are a couple that are moving through and on negotiations ongoing with the developers at the moment. So that's where we're really trying to focus to move things forward with those developers and get those planning permissions actually issued. And that happens obviously once that Section 106 planning obligation is signed. So I think it's why the stats sort of stand out slightly in terms of those permissions is because we've just got quite a lot stuck in the system at the moment that we need to get out the other end, i.e. issue a planning consent.
Sorry, just a quick follow-up. Are they stuck in the system because there's a kickback against the requirements of the 106?
I think in some cases, because they've been in as planning applications for some time, then there is a degree of which developers will probably look at some of those obligations to check that they're still required. But I think it's a mixed picture, and I think also it can just be that's the nature of the beast. Developers will look to negotiate until you get that agreement signed, and so we're continuing that process that just it shouldn't affect the heads of terms, which would have been referenced in the planning committee, so they would have understood what those heads of terms are. We just need to get that signed and sorted in terms of the detail. We have a template Section 106 agreement now, so I think that's one of the recommendations at the national level is to try and speed up Section 106 negotiations or the signing of them agreements, however you want to phrase it, because sometimes the delays can be just resourcing issues in terms of the legal input. But we have a template. We're trying to move forward with developers understanding the detail of the template and the construction of the agreement, the triggers on occupation for them to deliver those obligations that we've sought and require of them through that resolution on the planning committee. So we're working on all of those different degrees right down to the minutiae detail to try and just get those out the door as quickly as possible. And then obviously what we anticipate where they're outline applications is developers are going to bring forward reserve matters quite quickly, and that will enable us to move, I hope after this stage, quite quickly to starts on site once we get those reserve matters in and complying with the outline 106 agreements that are signed.
Thank you. I won't delay you any further. I'll let you get straight into the presentation then. Thank you.
Can I just add one, sorry, through you, Chair.
Sorry, yes, carry on.
Could I just add one thing in terms of that last discussion? If we think that there's 11,500 homes currently with planning applications under consideration by the council, and 6,250 of those homes are at Chelmsford Garden Community. So it's a large amount of homes, over half of those homes are in effectively one strategic site. And we were looking to bring applications forward in July. Unfortunately, exactly the same time, the the government announced the A12 funding cancellation. So that scuppered us putting those applications to a July committee, but we are looking working very hard to bring those forward to committee by the end of the year, if we're able, subject to government funding. And then also lands north of Broomfield, a strategic site that has section 106 that's been agreed now, signed, and reserve matters will be coming in on that site. 35% affordable housing secured on that site as well. The planning committee will be reconsidering the Southwood and Ferrers site, and good progress is being made on the Great Lees and Warren Farm sites, section 106s. So I think what we need to, the picture to paint here is that there is a lot of applications and there has been a bottleneck, but we just need to get those applications out and development commenced to enable us to have a better picture for you in the next couple of years.
Thank you very much. Councillor Steele.
Yes, apologies, because I think you answered the question that I'm just about to ask, because it's a bit of a concern that there is this lack of momentum and there's this, we're not overcoming the inertia of getting on with the building. I was going to mention the Bloor Homes one because it seems a long time ago that it was passed in principle, and I think it took a year and a half to actually get the S106 signed. So Bloor seems to be behind the curve. We mentioned Meadows being lost, and I guess the question is, what action are we taking to try and recover that? Also, as you say, Bewley's delayed by the A12 expansion and what measures we've been taking. I know we've gone into this new site regime now for the local plan, but I think some of us are concerned, have we done enough? Is there enough transparency to understand what have we done on the old plan that's, with the old plan lagging behind? How much have we done? Have we done enough to try and accelerate that and recover the situation rather than just go for new sites? So I think we're a bit worried as well that if we have new sites, are they going to then suffer the same lags as well? Is there something else? Are the builders unwilling to build? Or they're waiting for better conditions or something? What's causing the fundamental lag?
Well, I mean, builders were only through you, Chair, sorry. So, I mean, developers and builders will only build if they can sell the homes. I mean, that's a fundamental part of it. And access to mortgages and the ability for households to make big decisions on homes needs a certain level of confidence in the market. So, they are things that, unfortunately, the macroeconomics are things that are quite difficult for us to actually deal with. But what we can do is provide, a positive and proactive planning service, which I hope that and believe that we do. And also, we need to find solutions around some of the issues that are arising. And as I think Councillor Foster said, we're not alone here in any shape or form. But what we need to do is to work out how we're going to resolve this for Chelmsford and to ensure that we can start these sites delivering, because that is the big game really for us. The big win for us is to get some of these strategic sites going, because the affordable housing that comes forward, which you've heard, that's where that provides us with a really good continuous supply strategic sites for over a long period of time of affordable housing. So to get the strategic sites delivering is our number one aim, to try and resolve some of the issues that you've heard tonight. I don't know if Liz wants to follow up on any of it.
No, I mean, I think we're aware of probably the size and scale of the development that was allocated in the adopted local plan, and I think we have had the opportunity to look at that and think about whether we can facilitate in the review of the local plan some smaller and more nimble sites that aren't so dependent on quite the same volume of infrastructure for them to be delivered. And I think, that's something that some of the developers have been pointing to, in terms of having a mixed bag of sites, as it were, And that's something nationally also the government's put forward. I mean, I think their focus has been on self-build as one of the solutions to that, but that doesn't really deliver the volume that you need in terms of having a more dynamic land supply, in terms of a housing land supply. So that's one thing, but I think Jeremy's just right in terms of emphasising our focus has been on to probably have a review of where we're at with those sites. I think the report references there is a sort of an officer group that's been established to look at how we unlock this, to look more closely at what we should be monitoring, how we're monitoring it, where our starts are, what the profile of our sites are, who promotes them, you know, what timescales can you associate with different developers. I mean, we are trying to go beyond where we've been ever before to just try and profile our supply as robustly as we can. And part of that process was to look at the master planning, which came to Cabinet last week and went prior to that to Chelmsford Policy Board, to look at how we can shorten that period between allocating sites and things coming out of the ground. And I think that was a critical look back at ourselves, if you like, to say, well, did that in any way hinder us? Did it prolong that process in terms of sites coming forward and planning applications in that last plan cycle? So I think really it was like we're trying to critique everything we probably can from that sort of larger scale in terms of how you allocate sites and unlocking the sites. But there is no getting away from the national kind of macroeconomics, and you know, a lot of the developers have said to us the kind of the movement away from the help to buy means they're a little bit less, they've been reluctant to bring sites forward, whilst they feel like there's a bit of nervousness around that, and obviously interest rate changes, you know, all of those dynamics that we're less able to influence. But you know, there are positives, and there has definitely been a slowdown, but there are positives in terms of that supply is in that system still. It's moving it through that system and making sure that we see reserve matters coming forward quite quickly, and they are being prepared on those sites, even though there may not be outline planning applications issued at the moment. I know that colleagues in DM are already looking at some of those reserve matters, so we are anticipating things speeding up, but we will be monitoring those stages very keenly in this next year, and that will be something that will probably form also part of our evidence base as we go into the local plan review, because it's part of one of the sort of the Letwin reviews where they've looked at the portfolio, the mix of sites, the dynamics of sites, timescales in different areas across the country, and we'll be benchmarking and looking at that moving forward much more closely.
Can I clarify then, this analysis you're talking about there that you've expanded upon, is that with the new sites coming to the local plan, or are you also doing that with the current strategic sites? And is that something we could see at the Scrutiny Board? Could we see the outcome of that and how that's, where the issues are and how they're being addressed in terms of speeding up those strategic sites to try and recover the picture?
Sorry, yeah, of course, that's something we can share with you. I mean, I probably anticipate it will come as part of our evidence base, but we can certainly share it with members before then. It's a little dry in terms, it's like dates and times so it's timescales as well as the commentary that you see in the appendix already, but certainly it's like a benchmarking of timescales from when we receive an application to when a decision is issued on an outline to when a reserve matters comes through to when we start building. That's the level of what we're looking at, and so we've been profiling different scales of development to see how they perform at those different stages as well. So yeah, absolutely happy to share that with members as well.
And one final question for me, Madam Chair. The A12 block, is that now resolved in as much as junction 19 is going to be modified, and that's all we need for Bewley to get going again?
I'm very hopeful for a positive outcome or announcement very soon. I'm not going to prejudge that, but I can assure you and the committee that officers are working very hard on the government agencies, with the government agencies and county council, to secure the necessary funding for the CGC applications, which were going to be mitigated by the DCO scheme. So an interim solution to get these applications that are on the books with us out as quickly as possible.
Thank you for that detailed explanation. If I just summarise a little bit on that, my take on this is you're doing absolutely everything you can in the background to enable the house building to take place and freeing up and giving planning permission. But the current economic climate is probably working against us to a degree as it is elsewhere. And of course, that is something you don't necessarily have any control over at all. So I'll just finish there, unless I've got that wrong and you want to correct me.
No, I mean, that's absolutely right. I think the economic cycle is so housing and where you are in the economic cycle is just so important. So if you think that we adopted our plan in 2020, say if we'd adopted it 3 or 4 years earlier, we would have been in a completely different situation, because the events of 2020 and the implications in the early 21, 22, you know, there was a significant impact from a number of external sources, which, you know, is well versed, so I won't speak too much about those, but that led to a delay, and then that delay has just kind of sort of been baked in, and what we need to do is to sort of, you know, get the cork out of the bottle effectively and start delivering some of these sites that we've got there. There is, compared to some areas of the country, builders and developers want to build in Chelmsford. This is an attractive, lucrative, buoyant market for them. It always has been, and that will continue to be so. It's just we're needing to get you know, these strategic sites with planning permission and starting to deliver, and then I think we will start seeing that recovery.
Thank you very much. Do you want to carry on with the presentation? Thank you.
I think there wasn't much to add really, other than probably that you know, the summary that you presented, that statistical information does show that it is pointing to a slowdown at the moment in Chelmsford. And I will refer to that as in the short term, because of the volume of the dwellings that are in major applications remain high, and the medium to longer term does look you know, more promising, because we will then start to see those allocations coming to fruition. There are obviously national and local initiatives that Councillor Foster's already alluded to in her first item to increase the supply, and are summarised in this report, where we're trying to maximise any funding, national funding programmes and partnerships, and working to provide the additional housing, including the better temporary accommodation and supported accommodation. I would just probably say that that's a bit of a, you know, it's quite hard, because you can build your temporary accommodation, but then if you don't build at enough rates of your permanent affordable housing, then all you ever do is just fill your temporary accommodation and need more of it. So it is really difficult, but obviously we need both at this point in time, and that's why Jeremy obviously referenced the importance of maintaining allocated sites with a strong profile of affordable rented housing in particular coming through on those sites. And probably you know, we have had, I don't know if it's a luxury, but, you know, no, it's not a luxury, it's a product of having a plan in place for a number of years, that we've had those earlier zones at Bewley, which we're now seeing coming towards the end. We've got zone, I always call them zone W, which means nothing probably to most people around this room, but, you know, we've got R, yes and U and W, and eventually we'll get right to the station and we'll have those final ZZ zones, and they've been on site and they've been delivering. It's just they're coming to a natural end in terms of that phase of the development, and we need those zones 1 and zones 3 then coming through and picking up that slack, and that to be kind of a seamless in terms of actually having a build presence on site to maintain that supply of affordable housing that comes alongside the market housing on those streams to prevent any of that uptick in demand for temporary accommodation. The report does talk about you can see it just sort of gives you like a little look back over the year in terms of some of the national initiatives, and you can see at the national level everything is geared towards trying to accelerate supply. Back down, only 2 weeks ago we saw the announcements in relation to London and some of the measures that are being taken there, because a third of the boroughs in London haven't had a start in the first quarter of this financial year. So, against that context, we still, I don't think, we have the potential to get things through our planning system. So it's not completely dropped off a cliff, perhaps as it has in some of those areas. So the report summarises those measures and some locally to improve housing land supply in the short term, and obviously the focused review on proposed additional sites that will commence in next week, a couple of weeks, sorry. It is designed to support that process even further. But the housing land supply is dynamic, and we are keeping it under close review. And the focus, both in terms of national policy and locally, is obviously to improve the planning permissions, to increase the rates of commencements, and in turn improve the supply over the next 5 years. And just to reassure members that is, of course, focusing that permissions and rates of commencements on those sites that are already allocated. So there is a huge focus on those sites, in addition to maintaining a local plan and maintaining a suitable supply of land in the longer term against much, much higher housing targets that we now have, obviously, stretching targets to meet. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Are there any other questions? I just have one. I note on, I think it's table 3 and 2.8, the paragraph that goes with that the aspiration to build more suitable housing to meet the homeless need, we've not been able to manage that. And I don't know how we incentivise house builders, etc., to provide the type of affordable housing for rent. But that doesn't seem to have worked previously, and we're now up against a much more difficult housing market. So I don't know if you've got any comment to make on that.
No, I'd probably just supplement what we've done in the text. So our first stage to addressing that is to, where we've had that table published in our planning obligations SPD in the current adopted plan, is to put it in the reason justification of the text in the pre-submission local plan. And that might sound slightly insignificant, but it does raise the profile and the significance and the weight that we're giving that mix of housing. So we're taking it out of a supplementary document and putting it right against our policy. So that, in terms of to developers, is a very clear message that, obviously, if the typology of the development doesn't fit, it doesn't fit. If you've got a flatted development, it's really hard to make this fit. But if we're talking about greenfield sites, we're really serious about them achieving that mix of affordable rented homes, which is what that table relates to make sure that we get the sufficient supply of the 3s and the 4 beds to support those chain moves that Councillor Foster was referring to, which, rather than just, creating 1 2-bed flat and filling it with a family who has a 2-bed need now, you can maybe, if you've got a 3 or 4-bed house, the flexibility that generates to move someone who's in a 2-bed house and then move someone from a 1-bed house into a 2-bed house and so on. You could have 3 or 4 moves associated with a 4-bed house. So we are absolutely aware in the planning process of the critical need to make sure we fit with those types of housing. And that's why, I can't remember the date, we did provide a housing for rent planning advice note that we published to try and raise the profile on sites that were coming forward in the adopted local plan with more capacity than was originally anticipated in their around figure in the adopted site policies. And that planning advice note is still in play. So if those sites do come in for more on that additional numbers we are seeking on the additional affordable housing, we remove the 2-bed and replace it with a much higher 4-bed need to just try, and that doesn't impact their viability, but it gives us so much more scope to deliver more of those larger houses to create that movement. And then obviously, outside, well, I suppose it's not necessarily outside of the planning system, but I know colleagues in property services, in their land in Boreham that's been identified to purchase, that's obviously looking to work with CHP to target under-occupiers in their own stock, of which there is still quite a significant number, more so than any other RP, just because of the volume of stock that they hold. And that is really to recognise what they've been telling us, that the only way to incentivise an older tenant in occupying one of their houses to move into something smaller is to provide a bungalow effectively, and that's why we're still looking at those opportunities. They sound niche, I know they're small, but they can then create probably 3 or 4 times more the moves than the said number of units that you're bringing forward. And it is having that box that, where you're trying everything you can to bring forward as much as you can that we'll be doing. And I know colleagues are also working with CHP on their Pims Road development to look at what can be done where they're bringing forward that whole site they bought from the developer. And the 12 affordable rented units that we've assisted them with grant funding to maximise on that site, which includes, I can't remember the numbers, I should know, I've got them in front of me somewhere, but includes a number of 3 or 4 bedroom houses, to think a bit more creatively about how they can create some movement from those new builds, probably to assist also families, maybe where possible with disabled children who are stuck in not suitable, smaller, but also not adaptable housing to bring it forward. So again, it's a sort of all different scales of the process and stages of the process, working with colleagues in housing to just use any of those opportunities to try and do what we can to target those who are in the most, the greatest housing need.
Can I just clarify that any move that was made from a person who is in a house that, let's say, is too big for their current needs, that has to be by persuasion? It can't. There's not going to be a dictate, as it were, an order to move out.
No, that's correct. It's incentivising, and that's why I was talking about the bungalows, knowing what would incentivise someone to move from a family home, which I acknowledge is, somewhere they may have lived for a long time. It's not something, it's got to be something that would really be attractive to them. And we need to listen to that, understand that, and bring that forward. Now, we can't always do that through planning gain, because, it's not a typology that developers are all that fond of doing in terms of bungalows. They're land hungry, and you don't get the densities, you don't get the outputs, you don't get the numbers on the site. But where we can, we've tried to identify those opportunities and to incentivise that in a way that maybe CHP can't do through other cash incentives that they operate as well, to try and encourage this. So, yeah.
Councillor Steele.
Just to clarify on that, if somebody is in an under-occupation, so if one person living in a 4-bedroom house, do they pay the 4-bedroom house rate, or do they pay a one-person rate, i.e. there isn't an incentive to move then? Or is there an incentive on the basis they're overpaying for their accommodation?
You're testing me on my housing knowledge here, but I will just say that I think we're wandering into kind of the bedroom tax territory, which doesn't apply to people of pensionable age. So often those who are older will have a rent associated. Their rent doesn't change. Obviously, their rent reflects whatever size bedroom housing they're in, but there's no further penalty placed upon them. So if they can afford to remain in that home, then there probably isn't a financial incentive for them to move. So again, it's finding what would incentivise them to move, and about a single story building that maybe is new and is accessible, and yeah, adaptable. Enables us to offer that carrot. Right, you know, there's nothing more than a carrot there being offered.
Is that covered, Councillor Foster?
Actually, that it is. I was going to say that they would be paying the rent, and no, they wouldn't be penalised on the council tax. The single person rate, I don't think would apply. But also to say that where RPs are developing larger sites, certainly at least one at the moment, as part of that site, that if there's a sheltered scheme, then it's about making sure that the flats in the shelter scheme, there is a lift, and that the flats are perhaps larger, so that there is the capacity of creating 2 bedrooms rather than 1, so that people aren't moving down. And you remember, in terms of incentives, and our policy is that we no longer say you have to move to a 1-bed. If you downsize, then it's acceptable to move into a 2-bed, because that's what people want, and our policies are set up. So we're doing as much as we can.
Are there any other questions? Can I just thank you both, because I think at the moment it's a particularly difficult time for the planning department. It's tough in every direction, and there are a lot of things that you're not in control of that are impacting on the build and everything else that goes on. And I know the professionalism and the hard work that goes on is a credit to Chelmsford City Council. Of course, none of these things are a quick fix. And I guess the less houses that are built in London, the more people that may be coming down here as well to move in. So we've got to try to do as much as we possibly can. I think it's personally a topic that may well benefit from further appearance at Overview and Scrutiny. But I thank you very much for the comprehensive report and your attendance and the work that you're doing for the Council. Thank you. I'm going to move on to item 10 now, which is the decisions taken under delegation to Chief Executive.
Thank you, Chair. As of from the period of the 1st of September 2025 to the 31st of October, there was one decision, and that was decision number 4/2025, which was property purchases. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think now we're on to the work programme, which is also you, Freddie.
Thank you. Yeah. Item 11 is the work programme as attached in the document. Items yet to be considered are the new cabinet portfolio is yet to be allocated to a meeting date, and there's the use of the project management toolkit and recently discussed progress report on customer services.
Yeah, this was a suggestion, those that were at the training, that we need to have more ideas coming up through members for overview and scrutiny. I welcome a review of the customer services facility. I think one of the things we probably need to do is decide on the terms of reference to that. So I don't know whether we work to a terms of reference outside of the meeting, and then we can ask customer services to come forward on that. And I think, again, we do need to be more proactive. We're being urged to be more proactive. So I think if people can put their thinking caps on and come up with any other items that they would like to see. As I say, I think it would be interesting to have housing, the issues on housing come back before here, because it's such a critical part of our budget and what's happening in the development of Chelmsford that's worthy of note. Councillor Steele.
So related to that, Madam Chair, and just to show I was listening during the training, on item 9, was there a recommendation? I think I made a request that the team could return to show us what was being done to accelerate the programmes, the current build programmes. Are we going to capture that as a recommendation for item 9?
I think that's a good idea. I think one of the things is to note, which we will note, But I think we can add to that exactly what you've just said, really, because I think that's why I'd like to see it come back, to see how the activities have actually impact on the build and the developments, and how it impacts additionally on the homeless issues that we have and the type of housing that comes into the 35%.
Is it possible, Madam Chair, to do that, the T in smart at the end, in a timely way, in relation to the new local plan that's going through? It would be useful to have that information before we start adapting the local plan.
Yeah, I think there's two issues there. One, the local plan in terms of its agreement, because that's coming before different groups, but we need to carry on with the local plan approval and consultation. Anything that we do in here won't impact on that time frame.
I understand that, but I think it would be useful in parallel with that local plan going through to understand what's happening on the current build on the strategic sites to speed them up, to aid in the contingency within the local plan before the local plan decides.
I think Mr Brooks is going to contribute.
Yeah, so the housing is always a grey area between housing and planning. And Councillor Moore, who's the Cabinet Member for Greener Chelmsford, which is planning portfolio sits with her, she's due to give an update at the April meeting. So I think what we can do is bring the Housing Delivery Group report, which is what Liz referenced, back to that April meeting, if that's okay with you, Chair.
That's fine with me. Are you thinking that's timely enough? April.
When do we decide the local plan?
May.
Well, it goes forward for decision in June 26, doesn't it?
Yeah, it'll go to Policy Board and Cabinet in May and Council in June.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking it would be useful to show that we've accelerated the current build before we start committing to new sites. That publicly and transparency-wise, it would be useful.
Yeah, you don't give us much time for acceleration, but
yeah,
I'll take it for you.
Okay.
Okay, so we'll bring it forward to the April meeting to see what progress is. Bearing in mind what we've said about the ability to control certain things, I think there's everything we can do to incentivise, but in fact it's the builders who will decide on the builds and when they do them. So it's whether that works or not.
Sorry, Chair, just so I'm clear. So I was anticipating that was the information I was referring to in terms of some of that monitoring that we're doing in terms of the starts and the planning permissions and the completions. So that sort of supplementary level of information that looks back rather than looking forward, because we published a lot of the information that we look forward is in our housing site schedule. So that's our 5-year housing land supply, which will be updated prior to submission of the new local plan. And it will be, so we'll update it again with our latest forecasts. But the information I think you were particularly interested in, Councillor Steele, was what we've been taking through the Housing Delivery Group, which profiles developers on particular sites looking back and seeing how long delivery is taken on different sizes of sites, that kind of information.
Does the looking back give you some foresight into what could happen going forward? That's what I'm really interested in.
Well, it's what informs some of our forecasting on our 5-year land supply.
It's the forecasting
so it's
I'm interested in.
The looking back, and that trend data is now, as well as information from developers that we receive and intelligence on site and noticing where planning applications are, but it captures those sites that have already developed at different sizes and looks at their timescales, and that informs us, as government says you should do when you're looking at your 5-year land supply, to look forward as well.
I think I'm also thinking about the Get Well plans, and you've got a Get Well plan for the A12 expansion. Would that be presented in there as well?
I mean, sorry, through you, Chair, sorry. So the Get Well plan is a consequence of us being able to grant planning permission. So we need the Get Well plan to enable us to grant planning permission. I think the way I hear this is that there's a number of planning applications that are with us. By April, we need to be able to have granted some planning permissions, some significant planning permissions to make a difference. And I think that is the key difference by April that this committee can hear, is that some applications have gone out the door at the other end. What we won't be able to do is by April tell you that all the initiatives that we've just you know, Liz has spent a lot of time and effort going through, are going to suddenly bear fruit, because there's such a delay on actually things coming out of the ground. So the things that we're doing now may well be affecting delivery in 18 months' time, but it certainly won't be in the next sort of 3 or 4 months' time. But I think the key aspect for me in the next 3 or 4 months is getting some strategic planning applications with resolutions to grant.
All right, thank you.
And then, of course, there's the budget. So we will see what impact that might have. I think we've worked the work programme. We will add to that, and there may be other items that we'll add in that we'll talk off meeting about. We now move to item number 12, which is urgent business, of which I've not been notified of any urgent business. If there is nothing else in the room, then I will close the meeting. Thank you very much for your attendance. It's been a long day for some of us with the training beforehand. So thank you very much for your interest and your attendance. Thank you.